Hi, so first I'll give you two real life incidents and you tell me what's common between them. A 56-year-old farmer named Pramod has a 20-year-old young daughter who falls in love with this guy who belongs to lower caste. She actually runs away from the home without telling anyone, but ultimately returns on her own just a day after. Now the father Pramod, who belongs to the upper caste, he is vehemently against this relationship. He's so worried about social stigma that he decides to kill her. On September 9th, 2022, he takes his daughter to a field with the excuse of some work, and there he strangles her to death and he sets the body on fire. Just a week later, in a completely different part of the world, in Iran, a woman named Gina Amini is arrested by the guidance patrol of the Iran government. What is this guidance patrol? This is actually their religious morality police. They arrested her because she was not wearing the hijab and she was wearing tight pants. On 16th September 2022, she dies in Tehran in a hospital under suspicious circumstances. The police claims she died of a heart attack, but the reality was she died of police brutality. Some eyewitnesses, including some women who were arrested with her, they reported that she was beaten severely and ultimately she died probably because of her head injuries. So I ask you, what do you think is common between these two instances? I'll tell you, in both those circumstances, they violated one of the most important principles of life. And what's that principle? The principle is simply this. The highest goal of humanity is to maximize well-being of maximum number of people. That's a goal above all other goals. And what do I mean by well-being? By well-being, I loosely mean people living lives in which they are respected, they have a sense of freedom, they are healthy, happy, and functional. And the other way of saying that principle is that individual happiness and suffering is at the top of all other human goals. Basically, things that suffer, like human beings and other creatures, they are more important than things that don't suffer. And that includes all fictitious entities and material things. When I say fictitious things, I mean things like, let's say, a team, a group, a company, a nation. I mean, these are entities that are created for our purposes, but they're not exactly real the way we are real because they don't suffer. Yuval Noah Harari actually explains this very well. Basically, never ever sacrifice the well-being of living, breathing creatures in the name of some heavenly, big, glorious mission. Whatever you're doing in life, if it's leading to individual suffering, you're doing something wrong. And this is why every time you make a decision, like as an individual or part of a group, you must think about what would be the impact of this decision on well-being of individual members of that group or other groups also. Now, some may say this is obvious, right? Like, am I saying something new? But it was clearly not obvious in those two instances that I mentioned at the beginning. In the first one, the father Pramod, he did what? He prioritized his family name and reputation and his culture over the life of his daughter. He killed his daughter to avoid social stigma. He did not prioritize individual well-being. In the second example, the moral police of Iran, what did they prioritize? They prioritized protecting their culture, their religion. They had an idea of morality written in the scriptures, and for that, they killed a woman for doing pretty much nothing wrong. She was not harming anybody, but for them, her personal choice and happiness did not matter. They were prioritizing goals of a fictitious entity called the religion. Other than this, people can have other supreme goals also, like doing something in the name of God, expanding the influence of your kingdom and nation. Some can make the success of their company as their top goal. Some can make personal excellence as the highest ideal of their life. Like, if you're not successful, what are you even doing? They can find mediocre, average lives as just useless, meaningless. There are people who even glorify pain, suffering, war, as if they are noble things, as if they are more important than the boring, selfish happiness of individuals. So the question is, why do I think that well-being of individuals is the highest ideal? What's the logic behind it? Why can't there be another supreme goal? First reason is that whatever goals that we choose, it must be grounded in human biology and nature. You have to have anchors in physical reality. And when you study human biology and nature, you quickly realize that at the core, we are simply beings which are born with desires, multiple desires. The desires to survive, eat, drink, sex, compete, love, cooperate, etc., etc. We are basically hunks of matter walking around who want to just go from point A to point B constantly. So in a way, we are already wired with some goals. Just observe yourself deeply and observe others, and you'll get a range of goals which are coded in our biology and our psychology. And that's our starting point. And now we add the principle number 1 to this. The principle number 1 was equality of status. After understanding human biology and nature, you realize that it's just not you. Everybody is built like that. So in the fundamental, we are all actually very similar. We all want to pursue some goals just naturally. So we have to keep the goals of everybody on an equal level. Nobody can claim they are superior, they are better, and their goals must be preferred by society. Hence, the result of those two things is that the ultimate goal for the whole humanity is to maximize the desires and goals of maximum number of people. Well, I mean not maximize desires as such, I mean fulfillment of desires. Now, of course, in this larger goal, each individual will have to make some sacrifices, because often we are in competition with each other. Often there are limited resources. Everybody cannot get everything all the time. And when goals of one human comes in conflict with other, they must be resolved in some reasonable manner. For that, we develop some rules and laws in the society so that one person cannot dominate their desires over somebody else. Even though people are here making some sacrifices, but in the long run, when everybody believes in those rules and values, all of us are better off. All of us can together get to a stage where we can survive and have a good enough existence. And I'll tell you why. This larger goal must be anchored in biology. Because if you don't do that, then anybody can just claim anything. One person can say that God is the most important thing, and because God doesn't like drinking, nobody should drink. So this person has a supreme goal to serve that God, and now you cannot drink. Now, what's stopping me from creating another God? I can claim that I met my own God, and that God actually loves drinking, and I'll punish everyone who does not drink. So the rule of this society is I can randomly select anyone and I'll take their blood sample and there must be some alcohol in it. That's the ideal society. Now, how will you reconcile these two ideologies? How can you claim one is true, one is false? On what basis? Who will decide what's good, what's bad? There will be endless chaos and conflicts. And this is why the ultimate goal of life has to be anchored in human biology and nature, and not just personal preference from anybody or arbitrary contents from the mind of a philosopher sitting in a chair in the hills. And if you think about it, the so-called glorious goals of those fictitious entities like God, religion, or company, or team, or family, all of them ultimately feed into the core goal that we were talking about, maximizing individual happiness. You may just not see it that way. Let me explain. The father that killed his daughter to protect his family reputation. Now, why did he do that? Or we can ask, what would he achieve by protecting the reputation? What was the benefit of that reputation? If you ask him why, ultimately he'll say things like, well, so that we can feel pride in the society, so that people will connect with us, so that we won't get isolated, so that ultimately we can have a good life. Who can have a good life? Only the members of the family can have a good life, right? So he's protecting the family reputation so that the lives of the family members can be good. The final benefits will be experienced by individuals. They will feel some release of neurotransmitters in their brains. Because the family name is just in the papers, that name will not feel anything. Putin recently invaded Ukraine, right? Why? Because he wanted to bring the glory of Russia back. If somebody asks him, why are you doing that? What's the benefit of expanding your nation? Again, he'll probably say things like, oh, so that we can feel proud again. We deserve this. This is our revenge. So that we can create a utopia. And what is a utopia? Where everybody is living a good life. And what does a good life mean? That people are healthy and happy. So again, to justify the fictitious goal of the nation, you had to defend it in terms of goals of individuals. So whether you realize it or not, all your goals ultimately feed into individual happiness. And this is why individual well-being is the ultimate goal. So why not just make it the central one? Why not keep it in mind all the time so that it's never ignored, it's never violated too terribly? Why use stupid indirect methods that actually ultimately end up causing way more pain and suffering than actual happiness? So I ask you, why do you think people are just unable to see this simple goal clearly? Why do I have to talk about this right now? Why is it just not obvious to everyone? One reason is that we were actually shaped through the competitive process of evolution. All of us are born with instincts to compete, to dominate, to thrash, to take over. We get inspired by acts of heroism. We are attracted to excellence where somebody just beats everybody else and gets ahead. We also have a need to find something larger, something magnificent, something heavenly. We want to feel awe. And because of this nature, we end up prioritizing things which we shouldn't. The health and happiness of people Just 7 billion people living healthy and happy is just not that exciting. I mean, it seems boring. I mean, so what? Who cares about a life like that? I mean, you're born, you live happy, and you die. I mean, what did you do? What did you achieve? What did you accomplish? How did you change this world? Now, I'm not saying excellence is bad. Of course, excellence is great, as long as excellence feeds into individual well-being. What I mean is, if someone says, let's give an aptitude test for 7 billion people. Now, because we want great achievements, we only want to keep the most intelligent people. So in that aptitude test, we'll keep the top 50% of the people and just kill the rest of the 50%. What I'm saying is, I would not be in favor of that. And why? Because of the simple principle that I prioritize human well-being over excellence. By the way, the example that I just gave is not that exotic. In fact, it was partially the thinking behind Hitler's Holocaust. He wanted to create a better race for the world. He wanted to wipe out inferior races. For him, greatness mattered more than the lives of millions of people. So what I wanted to do is fight this instinct of prioritizing excellence, heroism, or godly things over health and happiness of individual people. I want you to become very, very sensitive to individual suffering. Wherever you see any individual in pain or suffering, your top goal must be, what do we do to resolve this? Which brings me to the final section. How do you actually apply this in your day-to-day life? Let's again start with parenting. What can parents do? Keep the well-being of the child at top. What does that mean? Your child must be happy, healthy, must be respected, and must feel a sense of freedom. Your parenting rules are in the service of well-being of child. Never make your own personal expectations as the most important thing of your child's life. Don't treat your children like you own them or they are your employees or something. You can't just make any rules by your own personal preferences. Every decision you take for them, think about, is it genuinely towards the well-being of my child? You have to be very mindful of what they want to do, what they love. Of course, sometimes you'll have to push them or stop them from doing things, but for that you must have very clear reasons, which you should be able to explain to your child and people around you. Second, relationships. Even in relationships, people tend to prioritize arbitrary things over happiness of each other. One of them again could be public persona. What do people think about us? So you try to control your partner or be mean to them because you are thinking that they are violating this public image. You may want to create an image like, oh, we do everything together. We celebrate everything together. We want to show the world how perfect we are. But behind the scenes, you are either dominating each other or just suffering doing those things. So you're again not prioritizing individual happiness. You have to give each other as much freedom as possible to pursue your own personal desires and goals. Another one is workplace. Sometimes leaders, big leaders or CEOs or just owners of company, they are blinded by some targets. Or we have to double our revenue in 1 year. And in that process, all of the employees in the company are working 7 days a week, 80 hours a week. People are completely burnt out, but the leader is saying, no, this is the company goal. We have to reach this. To some degree, Elon Musk is doing that with Twitter, and I'm not fully in favor of that, which is coming up with extreme deadlines and just putting it all on people. I say it's better to actually go a little slower, but make sure that individuals involved in the process can stay reasonably healthy and happy. This can happen with money also. Some people make collecting money, just accumulating wealth as their top goal, and they forget everything else. They are ready to fight with people just to save some money or earn some money. Someone accidentally pushes you and you drop your phone and it breaks, and now you're just fighting with that person because the phone was so dear to you. You spent 70,000 rupees on it. Your family member buys some makeup which you think is completely useless. Why would you spend money on something like that? And now you spend 1 hour lecturing them how they are wasting money all the time. So for a small amount of money, you are just ready to create so much negativity and disrespect a person. Some people spend hours and hours trying to get discounts on everything they buy. They could have rested, enjoyed their life, watched some movie on Netflix, but they are just worried about getting a better and better price. And if you're doing it for fun, getting discounts, that's fine. Everybody does that. But every time you buy something, you get anxious, you get worried, you get tensed. Then you need to reflect. Money is not the most important thing. Your mental peace is. So bottom line, just remember that life is a constant game of prioritization, and whenever you have to make some decisions, keep that as the most important factor. Things that suffer are more important than things that don't suffer. If we all abide by this principle, all of us can together create a society where people are healthy, happy, respected, and free. Thanks for listening. A very important factor in mental peace is that instead of just thinking internally, you should be able to talk about your frustrations to someone. But sometimes your friends and family can get tired of listening or might not even understand you well. That's why you should talk to a therapist. Your emotions need regular air ventilation. Your thoughts need regular garbage disposal, like once every week with a trained therapist. At Shridhar Life School, we have a team of therapists that you can talk to. Please go to shridharlifeschool.com to book your sessions.